Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the How to Create More Equitable Courses, their continuous improvement session. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the process of what this adaptive project has looked like from the lens of faculty and educational researchers, specifically highlighting the incremental steps of refining and improving courses, going through the process of changing pedagogy and also creating quality research design. And so I'm very excited to introduce our panelists that we have with us today, starting with Dr. Heather Belmont, who is the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Indian River State College in Fort Pierce, Florida. She has been instrumental in this process as well from the institutional side, so we're very excited to have her here today. And then followed by Lainey Culligan, who is a math instructor at Indian River as well. And she has been for the past 5 years. And during her time at this college, she served as the intermediate algebra course lead while teaching various math courses as well. And then next we have on our panel is Dr. Heather Michaels, who is the Physical Science Department Chair at Indian River. So we have a lot of Indian River folks with us today, so we're very excited to have them. And then next on our panel, we have Dr. Patsy Moskow, who is the Director of Digital Learning Impact Evaluation at the University of Central Florida. She's been evaluating the impact of technology-enhanced learning and supporting faculty scholarship of teaching and learning research for over the past 25 years. And last but not least, we have Dr. Julie Neisler joining us today. And she is a data scientist and education research leader with an expertise in the learning sciences. And Dr. Neisler serves as the quantitative researcher and data privacy officer at Digital Promise. So we're very excited to have this wonderful panel with us today. With that, we can start our questions. And before I guess we kind of answer, I'd love if everyone could go around and just give a really quick summary about their role with implementing adaptive courseware at their institution, and then followed by what incremental steps that were taken to refine and improve the course redesign. And for those who are not at the faculty level, feel free to answer what steps were taken at the institutional level. And I'm happy to drop those questions in the chat as well.
Certainly, I can start. I feel that this is a really quick one for me. Either you could call me the puppet master or the cheerleader. I'm the head recruiter maybe, but I hope that as the provost, and the person that helped facilitate this, I'm the person that brings in the talent, if you will, and then hand it over to my amazing faculty to really implement. And when I say that, you'll hear from both Heather and Lainey today about how they really put the adaptive courseware into action. And so here, my role is a support role. I'm here to help them where they need me, hopefully provide resources and lend a hand when they need some help, wherever that might be.
I'll piggyback on Heather. I got pulled into the adaptive courseware when Heather said, come to this meeting. I wasn't sure what I was coming to for a meeting. And I think she and I were basically the two from Indian River that were there from the beginning to the end. So I did the chemistry redesign, starting with picking our product all the way through implementing and continuing the refinement process.
Guess it leads it to me. So hello, I'm Lainey Culligan. So I'm also at Indian River, and we greatly appreciate in the math department Dr. Belmont's support, because without her support, it's been hard, because it's been sometimes like wrangling cats to try to get people on board and try to get things moving, because it's a lot of people and a lot of thoughts and a lot of minds working together for a common goal. So it's nice to have that constant support. So my role has been in the intermediate algebra as the intermediate algebra course lead. So I was kind of leading that project while also on the committee for other 2 courses in the math department that were part of this project, which was quantitative reasoning, which is our non-STEM track. And it led into college algebra, which was the subsequent course because we've seen it was working well with intermediate algebra. So part of the refinement process was just going, just doing something and seeing what worked, like throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. So that was a big part of it, was just seeing what worked, what didn't work. And we've seen that through the process, this was helping our higher achieving students too. So we went ahead and implemented it in our subsequent course. So I was also a part of that committee as well. So I kind of been dabbling in it all through the process. So, and it also came at a great time because it was right after our QEP projects. We were really diving into the redesign of our courses and what was working, what didn't work, and standardizing our courses across the department level. So it was kind of a great time, and we learned a lot from it and are continuing to learn through our adaptive features. So that's about it.
Well, I'll go next. I'm not at Indian River State College. I'm at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. So I'm, I guess, north of you guys here in Florida, but still got a lot of the sunshine. And I'm actually not the faculty member. I'm the research person here at the university who my job is really to evaluate or help evaluate anything we do related to digital learning technologies. So online learning, blended learning, adaptive learning. We've been doing it before this grant. So that's really part of my unit is the Research Initiative for Teaching Effectiveness. And we work with faculty and with the Center for Distributed Learning and the division of, we're within the Division of Digital Learning to try to make sure that we're keeping track of how we're doing as we redesign the courses and work with faculty. And part of that is more at the institution level, so monitoring success and withdrawal rates, looking at impact on student performance of instruction. But I also work a lot with individual faculty members who want to do scholarship of teaching and learning research. So help them develop surveys, gather data, look at past history, past course outcomes and things like that. So it's really, I get to work with the best faculty doing that because, as you can imagine, a lot of the faculty who you've already heard on this panel are the people who are trying creative things and are already in it to really improve instruction. So I think that's fundamentally why we're all here.
And I'm going to add that one of the unexpected things, of course, that happened when we started this is that we were hit in the middle of COVID. And I would probably say that was having these technologies was absolutely a blessing, Heather, Lainey, because our students had something that they could rely on that we didn't have in place prior. And both Heather and Lainey can speak to that, but also a curse because it was something Julie can speak to that we didn't really expect to have to analyze the data. And so our control groups and our experimental groups were really, really hard to analyze, right, Julie?
It's true, they were. But no, so I'm gonna disagree with Patsy. I think I get to work with the best faculty because I got to work with the best faculty from all 12 institutions. But yeah, so talking about thinking about continuous improvement, my role was looking at data that was already being collected. So grade data at the end of the semester and really seeing, okay, what does this look like compared to a control group? So like a prior semester or another teacher who's teaching with adaptive courseware, who's not teaching with adaptive courseware, and then controlling for those student level differences to really parse out the impact of the intervention. And I think what really played a role for equitable outcomes was the disaggregation. So we not only looked at outcomes for all students, but we also looked at outcomes for racially minoritized students, low income students, students who were repeating the class. And so I know that Indian River, right, is an example, we're implementing, and they had implemented these special computer lab classrooms. And so essentially we were doing like a matched pairs analysis of a control group to see were these students doing better. And these students were scoring 10, 15 points higher on average on their end of semester grades. And so that was really showing like these students are excelling really well who are in this special group. How do we get more students into those lab classrooms? And then also, is there anyone those lab classes aren't supporting? And so, for example, we saw a differential impact for students, like students who were parents, being able to go into those lab classrooms and have time to like sit down at a laptop without having to be bugged by children. Not that children bug you, they're amazing. But really, really being able to have that time to sit down and learn was really beneficial for them. And so really that disaggregation and seeing where students really being successful, what students might need some more additional interventions. And then, yeah, just giving that data back to the schools and then letting them do their things because you all are amazing.
So I think, Julie, you're making a great point, and it was really about the refine and improve, refine and improve, and refine and improve. And I think Heather and Lainey will both tell you that that's what we continue to do and continue to hope to do for our students.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate everyone sharing their insight and just their perspective throughout the process. And it looks like we're kind of already leaning into the next question about kind of that evaluation process and how did that process look in terms of monitoring and evaluating the impact of your efforts? I know Julie touched a little bit about that, but happy to hear from other folks too.
I'll jump in. So I looked at evaluation as, okay, can we have black and white data, but also the non-tangible stuff? Am I seeing more interaction from students? Especially, I did chemistry. Intro chemistry, online, students are non-interactive typically. So certainly we don't have data for it, but we know students are more engaged, more interactive with the adaptive courseware. We also used a common final to evaluate our 1020 with the adaptive course and then our 1020 without the adaptive. And so we did focus on a common final for our evaluation.
Okay,
And what happened?
COVID. COVID happened. No, I think Julie would agree with the chemistry course. We didn't see a huge difference between our control and our adaptive, our variable.
I would say yet. I would say we haven't seen impacts yet because, right, looking at grades, we know that lots of things go into grades, right? It's not just how much did you learn about chemistry or math, right? There's participation, there's attendance, there's quizzes, tests, homework, right? Projects, and all these different things. And so looking at grade data does let us evaluate in some ways because we know how students are achieving. And we know that if students pass or don't pass has really big impacts, right? We know that students who don't get at least a C or better in these gateway courses, more likely to repeat them, more likely to stop out, less likely to be retained, have greater student loans, like all these things are really tied up in grades. But I think one of the things Patsy really helped like expand our thinking because, right, they created they used Realize It and had this very engaging Spanish course that was more about colloquial Spanish. And I'm not going to speak for all the amazing Spanish things. I took Latin. But so one of the things that we saw was grades weren't changing a ton, but the number of students who were withdrawing dropped by like 90%, right? So even though the like course grades, like the average course grade wasn't changing it too much, a lot of the students were still getting A's, B's, and C's, but the students were less likely to drop out or withdraw, which means they weren't having to find other courses, they weren't having to retake it later, right? And so measuring in like lots of different ways of seeing how students are doing. So not just grades, but all these engagements. Also, I'm going to give a shout out, Indian River, you guys do focus groups as part of your QEP. And so it's very consistent as part of their process to meet with students throughout the semester and at the end of the semester and use these really rigorous data collection processes for getting student feedback and then anonymizing the data and doing transcripts and evaluating themes and using that data to evaluate. So I'd say the student perspective and then also what instructors are seeing as well.
And when
Thank
Heather
you.
says, and COVID happened, well, in science and math, these are not traditionally online courses at a community college. These are courses that we were teaching face to face before COVID. And all of a sudden, boom, we are online, and our faculty are as shocked as our students are. And so when we talk about increased engagement because of the adaptive, and that really is actually very meaningful.
Yeah, and I think to add to all of that, I think it's important too, the focus groups for me, that was, Julie, thank you for bringing that up, because that's huge. Maybe it's because I'm also part of the focus group committee, but I really value my students because their opinions and their thoughts, because I can think that they're doing fine because they have an A or a B, but they may be miserable. So I don't want them to be miserable, but just, doing what they got to do to get their GPA up. I want them to enjoy the process and see the reason behind why we are making all these changes and why we are trying all these new crazy, softwares and all this new ideas. So I really want them to be able to voice their opinion, because I think their ability to voice their opinion is important, because I want them to feel like a part of the process. I don't want them to be like something that's put onto them. I want them to be a part of all of this research, because that's what we're doing it for. If I love it, that's great, but it's not for me, it's for our students. So I want to make sure that they love it. And there's aspects of the focus group of being totally anonymous, because I ask for their feedback constantly throughout the semester, but I think that anonymous portion of it is important, because I want them to really be able to feel like they're a part of the process. They could openly say whatever they want, and the feedback is really, really valued, and we're going to actually change based off what they say. So I think that that's a huge deal. Something that wasn't kind of brought up too is I have like a million tabs open, I feel like, on my mind, because there's so many ways that we evaluated, but it's important to kind of look at all these different pieces of it. So from the beginning to the end, so starting at the beginning, we also did a standardized diagnostic. So I think that helped to see where our students are coming in, because in the math department, we're also dealing with this issue of having new Senate bills come in where we are getting rid of some developmental classes. So our students are coming in with different levels. So we're also trying to deal with that huge this huge piece of it as well. So I think the diagnostic piece was important to kind of see, and like Julie was saying, match our students based off of their level coming in, and then compare that to their final exam that was also standardized to the level coming out. There are so many different variables that come into our classes. So really having those standardized features, I think, really help to evaluate to see what's working, what's not working, and kind of make these continual refinements from there. Whether it's qualitative data or quantitative data, we're kind of looking at this as a whole picture. So I think that's important, because the focus groups also are for our students. They are for our faculty, and they're also for our embedded peer tutors. So that's, I know I'm opening up a can of worms here, but it's kind of an important piece in my opinion. So our embedded peer tutors are also part of this project, where we brought them in. They are students who successfully passed the course. They are recommended by instructors, and they sit in on the classes. They're an active part of the classes. So we also got to see their feedback and what they thought from being involved in the class, from helping the students outside of class. So that was another piece of the evaluation portion, of seeing what they thought and kind of making as a holistic view of evaluating the whole project in every aspect that we could. So
one thing, Lania, and maybe I forget if this was your experience or another instructor, but did you actually end up changing your adaptive tool because of student feedback?
Oh yes. So I don't like to settle. So I had students who the feedback was good, but it wasn't great, and I thought it was fine. That was what we were saying from the focus groups, where they were saying it was fine, the grades were coming in, they were fine, everything was fine. But it wasn't great. And there was some pieces that we thought like, okay, we like this piece, we don't like this piece. How could we kind of take it and change it? So we went from, we were using MyLab Math for that one. And we went from doing a quiz me where they had to kind of go through and get a certain percentage in order to have the next assignment opened. And it was just overwhelming for the students. So we still wanted to keep the adaptive features of the things that they liked, but I didn't want it to feel so overwhelming. So we just completely revamped it. And we just waited, and based off their feedback, we wanted to make it at their full potential. That was the ultimate goal. So we totally revamped it based off of student feedback. And made it where it was more like a more of a chapter type thing. So that way we can use it as a study technique. I was listening to the previous session before this one, and it was about the student feedback and everything. One of the students was an IRSC student, and she was saying how study techniques are really hard. Students don't come in knowing study techniques. So that was something from the focus group that really helped bring in the adaptive piece. They could study, everything. What are you going to do? Read the textbook in a math setting? Like you can study everything, but adaptive is super cool because it really just hones in on exactly the skills that you need to study on and kind of go forward. And the students wanted that. And we learned that from the focus groups, and we learned that from talking to our students. And because we're IRSC, we have such good relationships with our students. So we were able to see that and then make changes from there and say, okay, this is what we need to do to help kind of have two pieces of the puzzle. The adaptive piece was helping them, and then the study piece was coming in. So it was really cool to see and make changes based off of our student feedback. It was craziness, but that's what you do what you got to do to make it work.
Thanks, Lainey.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing. And I just had a follow-up question that just from listening, were the focus groups a component that was built into the original design, or did you find that you needed to add that in once that first semester was completed?
Okay, I'll take it. So it was brought, like I was saying at the beginning, it was kind of perfect timing because we were doing focus groups from our QEP. That's where it started. And this just kind of like followed in so nicely where it just went right through. It was a continuation pretty much of our QEP, our quality enhancement plan. So we were able to take these focus groups, and our faculty were used to them. Our focus group committee was already in place. So it kind of went in nicely, but it really was something that based off of our QEP project, we felt like we really needed to incorporate in this adaptive piece. So it was something that we requested as faculty to have done throughout the semester with our 3 different ideas, for the faculty side of it, the student side of it, and then that peer tutor side of it. So something that we requested based off of the feedback of our students and our faculty and everything. So
Sure, thank you for sharing. I couldn't help myself.
yeah, love it.
But switching gears a little bit to focus more on the continuous improvement aspect of this session, I'm curious to know how at each institution did you all incorporate building research design into your process. And I know that depending on the lens and your role, that kind of shifts between institutional focus and, what does continuous improvement look like at the pragmatic level. And so I'm just curious about what the process was like building in the research design into this process, and happy to post these questions in the chat too.
Yeah, I can start just because I'm at a different institution, but I think one of the things that wasn't talked about, and I love what my colleagues at Indian River State are doing, because we have a saying, uncollected data cannot be analyzed. So we're all about, if you can get it. And I think the student and faculty voice are both really critically important to making sure that things are going well, that students actually want to learn, and we all have to monitor the grades. That's always part of the component, but I think students can tell you quickly what's going well and what's not going well. how, how difficult it is to use a platform. And I mean, all of those do lead into some of the, the withdrawal rates that Julie mentioned. I mean, students will, particularly those who might be the more underserved students. So those students who are most at risk are the ones who might be the ones who are quicker to jump ship if they're having a challenging time with technology, or they don't understand or whatever. So one piece that we haven't talked about yet is really the process of, of continuing to look at trends. So it's easy when you teach a class once to do, well, I think it's still difficult, but it's easier when you teach it once to do, a snapshot in time. But really, the continuous improvement is keeping track of how things are going over the various semesters. The first time you teach it in any format, using adaptive or using any new tool, is never the best time you've taught it, right? So good teachers continue to all right, I need to figure out what's working and what's not working. That's the evaluation piece. You refine, you tweak, you change, you adjust, and then next semester, you start over again. You try to gather more data and figure out what's working well, what's not working well. And I think that's really important. And it's a challenge from an institutional level, something like this, where we have faculty who may be doing adaptive learning. In some cases, we don't always have a comparison. It can be hard to find a comparison group. So we try to look, and that's what Julie did with her team, looking at past iterations of the course. I mean, nothing is perfect. So if I taught it last semester, well, my students were different last semester, so it's not perfect, but it is something. And then you have COVID. So if it's not COVID, there may be something else, or hurricane in the middle of the semester. So it's always a challenge, but you still just kind of keep plodding along and looking at the trends and continuing to see what's working, what's not working. I really think that's important for the continuous improvement. The other piece is having those people who can make decisions in the room. So, faculty they can take control of what's going on in their classroom, but having a provost who's buying into what's going on. I mean, ultimately, if you have data to show what's working well, that speaks volumes. If you have to worry about licensing, or you need a little extra money, or you need instructional design help or something, you really need to have the data to show, look, I think I'm making a difference here. Here's where I am. Here's what's happening. Students like it. It's working. I need to keep staying the course, but I need X, Y, Z. Otherwise, you got nothing to to back yourself up. So that's kind of what the process we try to implement continuously here with a lot of our work. I think that's really what continuous improvement is all about.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd love to hear just from the faculty perspective too, what that process was like.
So when I very first implemented the adaptive courseware, was kind of just thrown into the course. But as the process continued, I redesigned the course around the adaptive software. And then it definitely fit in better. And I think the course went better, students did better. It wasn't just thrown in there as we got to do this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is we have to really, the software is one thing and the instructor is one thing, but we have to make sure it's cohesive. So it's really important to make sure that everything kind of flows together and fits together. So just like Heather said, we kind of had to start from scratch, have this adaptive piece, design the adaptive piece, and then design our supplemental materials off of that and kind of go from there. It's really important too for us as instructors. I felt like it was important to really see it from the student side. So it's time consuming. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not, but it's very time consuming, but I think that it's worth it to go through and see what the students see. So that way you can feel more prepared to deliver the material in the way that they're seeing it. So that was a huge part up front, is, designing the course, designing your material, getting ready, going through and actually doing the problems in the software so that way you can kind of encounter any problems before the students encounter them. So that way, that was important. I think that was a piece that my students really valued and they appreciated. So that was something from the get-go of really diving in, making everything cohesive, seeing what's working, even right after test one. Don't wait until the end of the semester. If that was any advice I would give to anyone, don't wait and don't be scared to change things. After there's 4 tests in most of our courses. So after test one, they kind of know a good gist of it. So stop right there and have a conversation with your students, whether it's a more formal focus group or whether it's just an informal conversation in class or a survey or something of that nature, but have that conversation of seeing what's working, what's not working, because sometimes it might just be a misconception on their end. I know this is kind of going off topic, but I think that it's really important to touch on is it's also really important to make sure the students understand why we're doing this. The adaptive piece is something that a lot of them, from my experience, they had no idea what was going on. They got it wrong and they went back and they're like, what's going on? Why am I going back? And they didn't really understand it. But if you really sit down and explain to your students, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, here's how it should work, they really can buy into it a lot better. And then whenever you ask for feedback, they're kind of seeing where you're coming from. So they're more able to open up and we can make refinements from there. Some students, after my very first iteration of using adaptive software, I remember that there was a time limit and they were saying that, seeing that clock on the time limit was there because we wanted to see what they knew and what they didn't know from the get-go. But they were saying just having that countdown stressed them out. And I get it. I can totally see that. So just by something little like that, having that conversation, I was able to take that timer where they couldn't visually see it. And that was all they needed, so a lot of it is refining throughout the process, not waiting till it's over, refining throughout. But then once you do get to the end of really taking a step back, seeing what worked, what didn't work, and being able to make those changes is important, and good and bad. It's okay to have something not go well. As Patsy was saying, the first time you run a course with something that's new, especially adaptive, it's not going to be perfect, and we didn't expect it to be perfect, and that was okay. That was the cool part of that's the whole point of the research, was to see, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what did we like from the instructor side, what did the students like from their standpoint, what did the peer tutors see from their side, and kind of make those refinements from there. Run it again, make changes throughout the process again, and it's a continual, it's never finished, it's never done. It's just a continual process of continually refining, learning from our experiences, and going from there. So I felt like that's an important piece that maybe I wish that I would have seen from the get-go, is don't expect it to be perfect from day one, because it's not going to be perfect. But having that conversation with your students and being vulnerable and being open with them, I think really helped for them to be on board, and them to help give me some honest feedback of like, hey, I'm doing this for you. They appreciate that, and they like the adaptive piece once they're, get used to what it is and what it's there for. So the refining part's always part of it.
I'm not on a campus, so I didn't help them or develop a research design process, but I still want to say, right, as the person with research in her title, everyone was already doing some form of research. Like every single campus we went to, whether they acknowledged that or called it that or not, no instructor was like, yeah, I teach the exact same course every semester and I never change anything. No, they change a little bit. They change something every time, of like, might move some dates around or something. And like, sure, sometimes you get as lucky to have like a Patsy who is helping you really formalize it and like write it down, but everyone was doing something for continuous improvement. So really a lot of it was just thinking about like, okay, are you meeting with other people? Like, hey, how about you get a gang to work on this together? Or like, let's write stuff down, like let's track things over time. And so like the easy thing is that you are probably already doing research, right? If you're thinking like, man, these guys sound amazing, I want to be like them, you probably already are. And so thinking about like, what do you do to reflect? And then how do you take that reflection and make changes? And then are you tracking that over time? And that's all continuous improvement is. I didn't say it as nicely as Patsy did, but like, everyone on this panel was already doing that to some degree. And at most we like formalize these processes that were already happening.
I think that's really well, yeah, I think that's really well said, Julie, that it's like sometimes there's little fragments of the work that's right in front of you. You just have to pick up those pieces and assemble it yourself. But what I really liked, I think, in those answers were that I'm hearing that it takes a lot of communication and transparency and vulnerability and also just flexibility, and that things may not but will not probably go the way that you envisioned, and that's okay, because it's kind of a learning process for everyone. And I think what's really unique about the timing of this project is that y'all were involved with this before COVID, right? And so there are some people who are pivoting to adapt, but more for kind of a survival need, and opposed to having that additional time to kind of play around and figure out what things work, and just how to get that that implementation just right. Not that it will ever be perfect, because it's a continuous improvement in itself, but definitely I appreciate those answers in that last question. And so this next, but also speaking of kind of these experiences, this next question that I wanted to focus on a little bit is, what were the key findings? What have we learned from this project, and how is it informing the decisions that come next in this continuous improvement work at your institutions? I'd love to start with Julie, just to kind of give an overview of what, because you've been working with all of the institutions. So what have you seen that's been a common trend across all of the institutions that have been involved in this project? But then I'd love to hear the individual stories as well.
Yeah. So I think the thing that we already know, but I have seen, is that faculty are amazing and work so hard to support their students. Pretty much everyone was like, how does it work for me? But really, does it work for the students, right? And so that was their first question. So prioritizing student learning, student growth and development, is it engaging my students? Are they learning? Are they doing better? That was our first thing that we noticed. We also know it takes about 3 semesters, right, to get the feel of what you're doing before you're really in the groove of like, okay, I know what all the buttons are. I can read my dashboard, all these things. We know that adaptive can have positive impacts. We're still trying to narrow down exactly when and where that's happening, but there have definitely been success stories where we've seen gaps between different ethnicities, different races, different income levels closing. We see students being more engaged, less students withdrawing from classes, more students getting credit. I know APLU has some prior research about the amount of money saved that students are saving. So overwhelmingly, we're seeing some of these really positive effects of adaptive. I'd also say, there are limitations. Most adaptive products require a consistent live internet access that allows you to stream in real time, right? There's no option to like download it to your device and work on it and then go upload something. And so being aware of those access limitations is something that I know developers and all these ed tech companies are thinking about. How do we make it more engaging? How do we make it more accessible? It's something that we're working on. And I would say the future is ripe for innovation. I know there's lots of different projects, lots of different work that people are doing and seeing what really works, what's supporting our students. And then, as this pandemic hopefully one day ends, and we're thinking about reinventing our classrooms and what would we do different the next time, I think there's so many possibilities. And so I'm excited to see what these other instructors talk about.
So I guess I'll piggyback off that. So
I'm going to go first for just a second, Lainey,
Yeah,
because I think
please.
you can hop in and,
Yeah.
and it really speaks a little bit to what you said earlier, that our state, Florida is always challenging us a little bit. First, of course, it was that they had reduced our student access to developmental education in a very unique way. This past year, they've hit us a little again, in that they have decided that all of our technical degree students are now going to have to pass a college level math course. And this has presented a very unique challenge for our math faculty, because prior to this, our technical degrees, we were able to choose between a math and science course. And if most of those most of those programs went with a fairly light science course, and now we have to get them through college level math. And Lainey right now is one of our champions for using adaptive software to help our students in this. And so I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. So that was exactly where I was going. So thank you for that. But no, I think that that's exactly the issue here is with all of these different, whether it's coming from the state, whether it's coming from COVID, because we, are having this new population of student coming in where now they have taken math online in the middle of COVID. So we, all these different levels and all these different issues, and they all come into our class. And it's like, now what? Like, how do we meet them where they are, all these different levels, and how do we go and how do we help them be successful without, how do we perform miracles is what I want to say, like that's pretty much what we're doing. But no, I think that adaptive has really helped fit a lot of these different needs that we talked about of helping students meet where they are, whether they're coming in from a technical side, whether they're coming in where they, needed the developmental course and weren't able to take it, whatever their scenario may be, we're able to meet them where they are. Even if they're coming in as a strong student, I don't want to take that away too. If they're coming in as a strong student, I see so many of them coming in and they just get bogged down because it's in a traditional static type setting where they don't need this extra remediation. They already got it and they just, want to go where they're at and really have that individualized attention. So I think that has been the biggest takeaway I've seen for my students is really having an individualized experience where it's differentiated and we're all meeting them where they're at and helping them get to that next level so that whenever they leave the course, no matter where they come in, they're all ending at the same level, which is super cool and something that I don't know besides adaptive how we would get there without spending hours and hours on end. So that's been for me the biggest takeaway and the coolest thing to really see. Also collaboration. So I know that it's hard to have collaboration in an online setting or in a math setting in general, whether we're face-to-face, we're online, or whether we're doing a different delivery method. But I think having students kind of be involved in the process has kind of helped bring them together where they might not all be working on, problem 3. All of their number 3s are going to be different, but they're able to say, oh, can you help me with this problem? And that would help start a conversation. So I think bringing the collaboration from our students and our peer tutors have been a great takeaway from this project for us. Because they're able to help each student at their level. So collaboration between our students, our peer tutors, and our faculties. So the way that we worked, kind of going back to, I didn't mention this on the previous question, but whenever we meet, so our committees for each course meet once a month and we discuss what's working and what's not working and kind of where to go from here. So I think that has been something that we continue to do throughout the process, and we're continuing to do after the project is over, is having these continual meetings and this support from each other and from our administration of saying, okay, this is what's working, this is not what's working, and we kind of can go from here. So it's been cool to see us from 5 different campuses come together and have this shared experience of what's going on and how we can best help our students. So yeah, it's been cool. I can talk about it all day. So
yeah, and for the record, my math faculty are so awesome. They work across all 5 campuses.
We standardize across 5 campuses. It is not easy, but we do it.
And
You
that's
guys
one
are
of the
incredible.
things. That's one of the things that we found also. I mean, we talked about the benefits for the students, but I think Julie also mentioned it's a lot of work to design an adaptive learning course, right? So we found, and she mentioned our math, or not our math, our Spanish language faculty, Ann Pruka and Casey Tart, they partnered. One teaches Spanish 1, one teaches Spanish 2, and then they share the content. And that really helped with a model that we could use to try to get other faculty to join in. So now don't just look for, individual faculty, look for departments, look for teams that will share content and help share the workload. So part of the challenge is, we know it works for students, but it's so much work for faculty that it's burdensome. You got enough to do, and now you got COVID stuff too, right? So there's a lot going on. So I think that was really helpful. So having staff that across campuses that work together to, divide and conquer, that's really the method I think that you have to approach if you're going to do adaptive learning, and figure out how to support it so that you can do more than just one class, and really trying to maximize the benefit of the technology for instruction.
Yeah. And that's exactly what our English faculty did too. They went with a Lumen product, and all the faculty adopted at once, and they continued to refine every semester and improve every semester. And so this collaborative effort has been one that is really working for our faculty college-wide. Julie, you're smiling, I know.
I mean, just when you had faculty working together, we had such more positives. Doesn't sound like the technical answer that I want to give, but more positive results, right? When these faculty learning communities on campus were being formed, right? You have people to rely on and learn from, and make mistakes together, but then learn together.
Yeah.
And so we know that really positively impacted the faculty experience as well.
Absolutely. And the other thing it really does, because most of our institutions rely on adjuncts, the other thing that our English faculty have done is they've put together professional development workshops, not only for our full-timers, but also our adjuncts. And so everybody is using this technology simultaneously. And so the experience that our students have, whether they have a full-timer in front of them or an adjunct, remember, our students don't see the difference. The experience is the same.
And we find, like, using faculty, it just adds credibility. I mean, if I try to explain to them, oh, you should use this because it's great for your students as a researcher, they will listen. Provost, it's top down, that doesn't work. But faculty to faculty, I mean, they listen to their peers, and especially in their own discipline. So like Anne and Casey are Spanish, but they've now they've infected in a good way. In other faculty teaching other languages within our modern languages department. So I think it really does make a difference if you can engage the best, most exciting faculty early on, and then kind of help them, use them to spread the word. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too. These are all great points, especially too. When I joined APLU, we were kind of getting ready to do some virtual site visits, and one thing that every institution had in common to say is that collaboration is key, but also communicating with other departments of what are you doing, and not just like the faculty within your own subject matter. So those things are always really interesting to see how, talking and sharing out really can help not just you, but the next person, along and kind of in their iteration of adaptive courseware. But I want to be mindful of time, because I also could talk about this all day. But we are coming to a wrap up here. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially our wonderful panelists. And Julia Chadwick, my colleague, is dropping some links in the chat. So I want to encourage everyone to, after this session is over, which is in a couple of minutes, to make your way back to the closing session if you can. Dr. Van Davis with Every Learner Everywhere is going to be sharing some really powerful closeout notes. So we're really excited to have him close out for us. And also, last but not least, Julia has dropped a link to our post-event survey. If you've already completed this one in a previous session, then you are all set to go. But we would just appreciate your feedback and anything that you'd like to share with us. So thank you again for attending our ADAPT Showcase 2021. So very excited, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.